Can I drink tea while this happens?
Please do.
I think it'd be great.
Don't let me stop you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Just don't slurp. Yeah, I'll drink my coffee. Hang on. Yeah.
Like this.
I think that's a perfect place to start. Welcome, everyone, to the Sky Sports F1 podcast with me, Matt Baker. To help me look back on perhaps one of the best races of the 2024 season, I'm joined by the 1996 Formula One World Champion Damon Hill and Naomi Schiff. Hello to both of you, slurping in the background. Naomi, how was your weekend? You were out in Canada.
Yeah, I got a last minute call to go out to Montreal, which I was really excited about because I've never been to the Montreal Grand Prix. But yeah, honestly, the atmosphere in the paddock was buzzing. I think when you know that you're going to have such mixed conditions on race day, it's inevitable that you've got an incredible race on your hands. And my gosh, did it deliver.
Damon, you tweeted before, you said, looking forward to watching this race more than I have for a long time. I think it lived up to the hype, didn't it?
I think it definitely delivered yet again. I'm also very gratified to know there's another place on planet Earth that gets as rubbish weather as we get in England. But normally it's lovely in June. It can get really, really hot over there. We've had some pretty hot tracks and hot days down in Montreal, but not this time. And of course, the wet races provide us with so much excitement. It seems to be. It's by accident, perhaps not by design. It's not one of these circuits that were designed on a computer. It was just laid out around the island and it works every time. I mean, it just is great fun.
Yeah. Naomi, was it sort of the perfect display of driver skill that afternoon in terms of with the changing conditions? It was almost like every lap was a different racetrack. And just from... Look, I've got two racing drivers here, so I'll lean on both of you guys for this. But I think watching the skill and the control that the drivers had in those conditions was just incredible to watch.
Totally. I wouldn't say that it was the perfect display because if there were no incidents, then it would have been the perfect display. But, you have to say hats off to them because a track with changing conditions is so tricky to really know. Every time you approach a corner, are the conditions going to be different? Should I brake later? Can I turn in earlier? And I think there was a point where I remember Max was putting a real pressure on George. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, this is a real opportunity for Max here, because when you're in those conditions, you're kind of battling your own instincts of when you typically get on the throttle or when you turn or how aggressive you typically are in the car. And in those conditions, you've got to be so patient with everything you do. So if you've got pressure from behind, it's so difficult to maintain that composure. And I think, hats off to everybody because it was not easy out there. And yeah, they were throwing a couple of natural forces at them all weekend long. So it was impressive to see.
And animals, small furry creatures as well,
exactly.
were thrown onto the track. I don't know if someone's froze them on. I think they probably, but I saw a few running on. Thankfully, they're not that big. But I'm a vegetarian, so I don't want to see any animal hurt at all in the making of Formula One race.
I don't think it made it onto the broadcast, but I think Max actually ended up having to avoid a groundhog during the race as well. So yeah. It's never nice when you have that happen on track. You don't want to hurt any animals, do you?
DNG did not groundhog.
Love that.
Damon, tell us about the win for Max. It was one of those that I think you look at and you go, that is someone at the top of their game, able to avoid all of the pitfalls around them, was able to keep his head, keep his cool, and actually when he was out in front, I guess probably always did look like winning, didn't he?
Yeah, I think you have to say that now it's probably a good couple of races this year where the win for Red Bull has come down to Max's brilliance and his ability to keep calm under pressure. I was very impressed with the way he didn't get freaked out when he didn't get the jump at the start. He slotted in. He seemed to kind of be biding his time. And yeah, even though he's complaining about problems with the car, he can't touch the curbs. He sounds always on the radio to be pretty relaxed. The only time he doesn't sound relaxed is when he's annoyed about something or someone. So he vents his fury. But otherwise, he's pretty able to drive at the top of the game of Formula One and still think clearly and strategize and take his opportunities, because he really needed to. He got an opportunity and he held on to it. He actually didn't drop the ball or anything like that. And you have to say that yeah, he's just very, very good.
Yeah, but simply he's very, very good.
I'm stating the bleeding obvious, aren't I? I'm afraid I don't get any points for that one.
To add to that, I think the weather was probably Red Bull's saving grace this weekend. And obviously, whilst Max put out an incredible lap in qualifying too, but the identical lap in as George did, which is only for the second time in history. So hats off to him for that, because I was obviously in dry weather conditions. But yeah, during the race, I would say that, had there been a completely dry race, I don't think it would have been theirs. I mean, whilst he did manage to fend them off a little bit, they didn't ever really seem as comfortable as the other teams, particularly Mercedes, who had outright pace all weekend long. But yes, Max did bring it home once again for Red Bull. But again, I still think it's somewhat of a team effort, because on a day like that, all the elements have got to come together. Every single piece has to come in, strategy calls and tyre choices and all of the above. But yeah, we've got to say hats off to Max, particularly for that qualifying lap.
The weekend threw up a lot of interesting stories, so we're going to try our best to get through as many as possible. But I think probably the place to start is really with Mercedes and the form that they seem to have found at the moment. Obviously, the result perhaps didn't quite go entirely their way. George Russell getting the pole, as you said, Naomi, but couldn't quite convert to the win. But there's positive noises, aren't there, coming out of Mercedes at the moment? Damon, I don't know if you saw the Toto quote. This weekend, the car was capable of winning. We haven't heard that, have we, from the likes of Toto Wolff in a really long time?
No, and it seems amazing, doesn't it? But it has been a long time when they've had a car that looked anything like a car that they could, campaign with, and the drivers were happy. Lewis, notably, was very, very happy. It's not the first time. He did say he was very happy in a few FP sessions on Fridays and stuff, and then it seemed to kind of fade away when it got to qualifying. But George did a great job with the car he had to get pole position. Oh, is that the first? How long is that since they had a pole, Mercedes? Well, anyway, but it might even.
I think it was Hungary, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, Lewis's pole in Hungary. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Right. But the car looked good on the track. I think Jacques mentioned it looked planted. Jacques Villeneuve was commentating with us, and he's right. The car looked like it wasn't skittish and it wasn't porpoising and it didn't have all this. He could use a bit of curb. So they're comfortable, they're happy. New front wing seems to have been the trick that seems to have harmonised all the aerodynamics, brought about some performance, but it is an outlier track, Canada. We to go with that to Barcelona, which is the next race, that will be the ultimate test of their progress, because Barcelona is really just like a wind tunnel. It's pure aero, it's high speed, medium to high speed everywhere.
Naomi, in terms of what the Mercedes are able to do to the car to develop it, does it feel like they're actually now developing the car, as opposed to perhaps in the last couple of years, 22, 23, certainly they were just trying to fix problems? And when you're fixing problems, obviously you're not actually developing and getting faster, you're just trying to fix what's going wrong. So do you sort of start to see the momentum shifting now and actually going, no, we're going to make this car faster? And seemingly over the last few weeks, those upgrades they've bought have had a real tangible effect on the lap time.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can tell that the direction that they're going in now is clearly working. Whether that's just because they're developing the car rather than putting out fires as they maybe have in the past, I'm not entirely sure. I think there have been so many times that Mercedes have brought updates that have worked better than they expected, or others that they were expecting a lot out of, and there was actually not very much correlation between what they were seeing back at base and on track. Whereas now you can tell that what they've done has been able to unlock potential that was already in the car. So whilst everyone's singing the praises of this front wing, yes, the front wing is the element that's been able to unlock that potential, but it's not necessarily just the front wing that's bringing all that additional performance. It's the combination of what that's doing and how it's interacting with the rest of the car. And obviously they had this front wing on George's car out in Monaco, but Monaco is obviously not that much of an aerodynamic track, so we probably couldn't see all of the benefits of the front wing until now. This weekend they obviously both had it on their cars, and we can see that this has clearly stepped things up for them. But as Damon rightly says, Canada is obviously an outlier, and Barcelona has proven to be in the past a track that, because of the nature of its variation of corners, can be a track that will give you a good indication of how the cars will perform at many other circuits. So I'm really excited to head to Barcelona and see where everybody truly stands.
Naomi just inadvertently brought up an interesting effect of change of track, because you mentioned Monaco, and of course Ferrari, brilliant at Monaco, absolutely nowhere in Canada. And I think this is where things are getting very interesting in Formula One, because the gaps are getting smaller, the advantages between cars are getting very small, and tiny differences make a huge difference in terms of where you start your race and pace. So we saw even in the damp racing in Canada, with a track that was constantly changing. I mean, think about the Hasses in the race on wet tyres. You know, they were flying along. Yeah. I was really hoping they'd make it to the front, but it didn't rain enough. And then the next thing that happens is it starts to dry, and intermediate lot come through. And then you get people who go on hard tyres. I mean, the Mercedes guys, they started with a pit stop. They went, I think it was George was on medium and then went to hard, and Lewis went the other way around. And I'm scratching my head looking at that one going, wait a minute, you just got one guy. They obviously wanted the tyre that the other person was on. But, these subtle differences now are having a big effect in performance. And it's a bit like, a tight high wire act. You only need to slip slightly and you're completely off the peak of the performance. And it's very, very critical now.
It's exciting. That's what it is for Formula One fans everywhere, because we are getting, after perhaps a couple of years of a lot of domination from one team in particular, we're now actually starting to get perhaps more those tiny differences putting pressure on the top team, and then actually we're seeing that play out. I want to talk about George Russell's performance this weekend, because obviously look, he had an incredible Saturday, the original Mr. Saturday George Russell, but I mean, Naomi, do you think he was obviously disappointed not to win the race? I think anytime you start from pole, you're going to be disappointed not to win the race. Was the win on? Do you think that he has a right to feel disappointed not to have won?
Absolutely. Look, if you put it on pole position, you've been quick throughout all the sessions in the weekend. Obviously, I think Lewis actually had the upper hand throughout most of the free practices, but after studying some of Lewis's data, George really, turned things around in qualifying. He proved even in moments during the race that he had great pace. But I think, unfortunately for George, whether or not the win was on, he made one too many mistakes. And as a driver, particularly when you think that there is an opportunity to win and you make a mistake yourself, you're going to be really hard on yourself, because it's an incredible opportunity that's now lost. So I can totally understand why he's frustrated with himself. I do think that there were moments in the race where McLaren potentially managed the race a little bit better, particularly that opening stint. So maybe that could have taken that victory away from them anyway. But you could see George was coming back at the end when things dried out. So had he have not made the mistakes he'd made, he would have been right in the mix of it, battling for that first place.
Damon, I'm hesitant to ask this question, but I'm going to do it anyway, because that's what we do on the podcast. We stir the proverbial pot. But look, does George maybe make one too many mistakes in those critical situations? If the pattern over the last few years, like thinking back to Singapore last year, just in those moments, is there a school of thought in which perhaps it's just one too many at the moment?
Nobody's perfect, are they? I think the problem with George is he started off in a high profile seat. I don't think he did a pretty, before he got to Mercedes, he wasn't making lots of mistakes. But we get to the sharp end, you get the focus. Everyone's watching everything you do and criticising everything much more viciously, or at least being more observant of any failing at all. So I don't know. I think it can be slightly undermining if you're getting coached by your team boss over the radio during a race, being told to sort of focus on that. I think he knows what he's doing, but to quote a famous racing driver, I do think that this is a problem for George, because he is clearly he's been there in Mercedes now. They haven't had a great run, but he is definitely doing the job for them. And Lewis is off to Ferrari next year. And he is trying to establish himself as the lead driver. And he's yet to achieve that, I think, because they're talking all the time about who's going to be his teammate for next year, rather than talking up George. And I think that can be, I think Mercedes ought to back him a bit harder. They ought to give him a bit more confidence, and then he doesn't perhaps have to try so hard and to prove himself in the race. Because it seems to me he's trying to compensate a little bit for stuff. I think he needs to cool it and just. He's got the speed, he's got the ability, he's very intelligent. I'm sure it will. He can deliver for them if they give him a bit more comfort there.
What can't have helped Naomi, I guess, is Toto's very public courting of Max Verstappen. Those sorts of things, I guess, do put George on the back foot slightly with trying to, as Damon says, establish himself as the number one. If Kimi Antonelli comes in, you would surely say then George is comfortably the number one, but it seems on a bit of a knife edge at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, yes, while I agree with those sentiments in that the team can play a big role in calming their driver down, making them feel more confident, making them feel more secure, and therefore they might not push so hard on track and overdrive in some instances. At the same time, we are talking about Formula One, and at the end of the day, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and the teams are going to be out there looking for the best possible driver. And if they have the hint right now that Max Verstappen is available or could be available at some point, then they would be silly to not attempt to get him on board. And I think George will understand that, whilst it may be frustrating. That might be why he's pushing so hard in this moment, as Damon said. He's thinking, what can I do to prove to them that I'm enough? We've got one moment here to potentially have a victory, which we haven't had the chance to have in many, many months. Could this be the one thing that I could do to calm them down and turn their heads away? And every single performance on track at the moment is an audition for the drivers who are trying to prove themselves in whatever way they are trying to prove themselves, whether that's securing a contract or making sure they're seen as the number one driver. It is every single last drive is what people remember. So I can understand why George is putting himself under some pressure. But yes, I mean, when Toto came on the radio, I thought to myself, gosh, I remember when my team bosses used to come on the radio, it would put the fear of God in me, and I would think to myself, what have I done that needs them to come onto the radio? So I don't know if that's helpful. Maybe he did need that calming voice. Maybe he did need someone to tell him, look, just recenter, refocus, and you've got this, but just stay focused,
I mean, he has been a bit hot-headed sometimes. I mean, the Bottas thing in Imola and also two of his overtakes in Canada, well, one didn't work and the other one did work, but only because Lewis kind of spotted him at the last minute. He went down the inside in a pretty brave move, it has to be said. So yeah, maybe there is a degree of, that's what I mean though, I think if you're confident, you don't need to do those desperate moves. You can bide your time a bit.
I was looking through the ages of the sort of current crop of at the front of the grid. You got Charles, Max and George. They're all 26 years old, and then Norris is 24. And I'm just intrigued what they're all thought of in slightly different regard. All of them have gone on to achieve, incredible things within the sport. But I guess George just isn't quite in that same Norris, Leclerc, Verstappen category, is he, at the moment? He just, there's a little bit to go before we start talking about him as that championship contender, I guess, in the way that we do about the others.
And I think that, it's slightly unfortunate for George because, he did win in F2 and beat most of those drivers.
It's a long time ago, though, isn't it?
It's a long time ago, but unfortunately, he didn't get the drive at the team that was going to give him the opportunity to shine immediately. So he spent many years at Williams kind of overshadowed. Whilst there were always whispers of his talent, it's only now that he's come to Mercedes that he's got any chance of really proving against those other guys what he's worth. And the car just isn't giving him that opportunity either. So had he have had a car that was competitive and he would have had multiple podiums, multiple victories, he'd be seen completely differently right now.
I mean, we sit here and we're talking about him. And of course, it's almost like a competition to do a self-portrait, really, isn't it, with this game? Because you've got the people who are talking about it and creating an impression and trying to describe the driver and his strengths and weaknesses. And then there's a driver who has what he says out of the car and the way he behaves and how professional they are. That's another side. But then when it comes down to it, what they do on the track is the ultimate deciding factor, isn't it? It is. That's the thing I like about Formula One, is that they say when the flag drops, the BS stops. You know, it is literally, we can talk all day about people and whether they've got the right this, that, or the other. But once it comes down to what happens on the track, then we find the truth about a person. And don't forget, he was the Ollie Behrman of a few years ago when he got his break in Mercedes, when he subbed for Lewis. You know, he had a fantastic debut, didn't he? I mean, everyone was going crazy over his performance. And he, unfortunately for them, the Mercedes dropped the ball in effect with the new regulation changes, and he's been having to slug it out in a difficult car. But he's held his. I would say very rarely has he been massively overshadowed by Lewis, and now he seems to have got the upper hand. And it may be because he's the guy staying and Lewis is off. And some very interesting comments, I thought, from Lewis, saying he wasn't very happy with his performance over the weekend. So he's admitting at least he's not putting in his best for whatever reason. But I think if you're judging George can do it. You know, I think they've only just resurfaced and got to the front of the pack. And maybe it was all a bit desperate. It got a little bit of, I've got pole position, I want to win this race more than anything. And he's maybe over trying a bit. And if they give him they get a bit more performance, Mercedes, and they start to qualify regularly on the front row, then it will start coming to him a bit.
It's a perfect segue, Damon, actually, into talking about those Lewis Hamilton comments. And the headline for me was, he said, one of the worst races I've driven, which I thought was very, very strong from someone like Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, well, one of his worst races is probably way better than most people's other races. So
well, exactly.
He's always got that to play with.
It's all relative, isn't it? But I wonder, Naomi, with Lewis, and is there a case of, obviously Mercedes haven't been fighting really for wins over the last few years, like. And I'm going to use a horrible football analogy here, but like match sharpness, you know, if a dominant Lewis Hamilton in the 2019, 2020 years, that when he's right at the very peak of his powers and he's used to winning week in, week out, do you think that Lewis Hamilton on a weekend like we've just had performs better, is able to get more out of the car? Just there is a match sharpness element to it? I
think so. I think once the opportunity is there, it kind of triggers something in you that wakes you up and you become a little bit more alert. You know, honestly, I think if we could take this back to what happened in Abu Dhabi in 2021, I think, you know, the way I see things coming back in 2022 with a car that was not able to get revenge, for lack of better words, was probably really frustrating for Lewis. And I can imagine how, from a psychological perspective, that may have bogged him down a little bit. It was a lot to come back from, then to not be able to really have your say immediately. Must have been tough. I think 2023, I felt that it was turning around. You could see that he was a little bit happier, a little bit more confident, and a little bit more himself again. But for whatever reason, coming into the season, that seems to have gone away. And now, I don't know, was it 8-1 coming into Montreal in terms of qualifying, that he's been out-qualified by George. So that in itself is not going to be very comfortable for Lewis. You could see that already in Monaco, there was some weird body language and sort of Lewis saying that he was not going to out-qualify George for the rest of the season. So I don't know if there's also a whole new layer of a psychological aspect that's coming in with essentially what is like a divorce between Lewis and the team, and it's going to happen throughout the season, and inevitably he's going to start being left out of important meetings. New parts, George is going to be the preference for the team in terms of that, but obviously he's also ahead of him in the championship, so that's the case anyway. But all these sorts of things are going to plant a little bit of a layer of doubt, both in the team's head and Lewis's head, of what game are they playing? Has Lewis checked out? Is he still on board? And so I think both of them are going to have to try to do whatever they can. I know that there's the sentiment from Mercedes and Lewis that they want to end this on a high. I think they both really feel that way. There's so much respect between the team and the driver. But the reality of it all is when that doubt starts to creep in, can you maintain that relationship with the team? So I can't even remember what your question was, but I've gone on a massive tangent about where Lewis's mindset is. And it's got to be hard. But yeah, I hope that we'll see him reset. I don't know if that's going to be when he gets to Ferrari next year, what it's going to take, but it would be great to see him have somewhat of a comeback and be fighting for victories again. I mean, I was saying the other day that since I've been working in F1, which was 2022, I've not seen Lewis stand on the top step of a podium, which is just crazy to think. From winning for so many years to not having had a victory in such a long time. I mean, that in itself has got to be a tough one to swallow.
Yeah, he's got Damon. He's got 15 races still left.
Yeah,
I put that actually with Esteban Ocon, a very different situation at Alpine, but we're having all these discussions about maybe a bit of tension in the team. It's like, oh my God, 15 races, that's most of a season still left.
Well, when Naomi said it's like a long divorce, it really is going to be long. I mean, we're just over a third of the way through the season. I mean, it's just going to be very difficult because he won't feel like he's part, as you say, and I mean, he's not part of the project for next year. It's nice that he thanked the team, didn't he? He made a point of thanking them for bringing through the developments and so forth. But, he will not be enjoying the fruits of whatever they put in this year for next year. So he's off to Ferrari. So, it's a difficult one to be... how you race. I mean, the only thing I can perhaps relate to is when I decided to retire, and I decided in the middle of the season that I wanted to end my season in 1999, and I had the rest of the season to complete before I could stop, and it was like swimming through treacle. It was just so difficult to drag yourself through that. And Bernie, bless him, Eccleston, famously said that when a driver decides to retire, when they see the red light, they should stop immediately. And the problem with the announcement that came out with Lewis was it came out right even before they'd done a race. So I wonder whether that was something that leaked out, and he had to kind of get it out, because normally driver announcements happen around the time of Monza in September, but we seem to be creeping earlier and earlier through the season before they pull the trigger on things like that.
Yeah, silly season began in earnest in January. I remember being on holiday when that Lewis news broke. Look, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out throughout the season. But as I say, still a lot of the season still to go. Let's move on to a couple of the other big stories. There were a few drivers afterwards, basically George, Charles and Lando, who all believed they should have won that race, or said that they were in with a chance of winning that race.
Charles?
Sorry, not Charles, beg your pardon.
Charles was definitely not in with a chance of winning that one.
The guy who DNF'd. Not Charles, sorry, I was still thinking about their ages, they're all 26. So there were quite a few drivers who said they could have won. But I wonder, one of the things that Lando said afterwards, which I thought was really interesting, we're at a level now where we're not satisfied with second. The target is to win. Naomi, I just wonder that really sums up, doesn't it, where McLaren feel they are now and where they've got to, even in the space of this season.
Yeah, how great is that, I mean, for us and for the audience to hear, because, a couple races ago, or even like half a season ago, well, maybe half a season ago, they were already in it. I mean, from Silverstone, they really did have an upturn. Before that, it didn't seem like they were in it for the victories. And I remember having a conversation with Lando in Abu Dhabi, and I said to him, do you think you'll get your first victory with the team this coming season? And he said, yes, without a shadow of a doubt. And it's great to see them actually having done that, obviously, in Miami, and now more and more being right at the top. And I think what's positive for McLaren is that they've proven now that they've got this pace on very different sets of circuits. So it does seem like they have a car that's all round pretty decent and that can really fight. And that particularly on race day, they have a pace that really puts them in the fight for the win. I think it was Imola where he could have had the victory. Had the race been 1 or 2 laps longer, that could have been his. Obviously, Monaco was a Ferrari wipeout. There wasn't very much racing going on there anyway. But it's just so exciting to see that there's more teams involved in it. Ferrari obviously dropped the ball this weekend in a couple of different ways. And it's a shame for them because they were so close in the championship title, whether it was Charles to Max or Ferrari to Red Bull. And there is still a long season ahead, but every single race is going to make the difference now because there are, to me, what feels like 3 teams relatively in it with a chance to fight for this title. And I don't want to say that too prematurely because I did say earlier that Barcelona should be the race that shows us who's in it and who's not. So let's just hold that thought for now.
Yeah, most eagerly anticipated Spanish Grand Prix, Damon, I think, for quite a while, because it seems like out of all of these teams, we're probably going to get a more realistic picture of exactly where they all sit in the pecking order.
Well, I'm going to be get a reputation for being the person who pours cold water on everyone's hopes, but I just think Spain is. I think that Red Bull will be much happier in Spain. I think their car will work better. So they don't have curbs to worry about. They've got long sweeping corners, and I don't know. But having said that, I agree. I think that McLaren have found something. They've made more progress than anybody up and down the grid, I think. And they were also good on their tyres, and that showed when the race was getting onto the intermediates. It's only because the safety car came out and cost Lando 10 seconds that he didn't come out in the lead. And that would have completely changed the complexion of that race. So tyre wear, how they route the tyres, which is it's a tyre killer. Front left tyre in Barcelona, it just absolutely eats through the tyres. So we don't know, because we haven't been to really. I'm trying to think where else was as tough as this on tyres. Bahrain's brutal. But things have changed since then. So, I mean, this is going to be a big test to see whether McLaren can actually run on a track like Spain, and that will then give us a clue for things like Silverstone, Spa, and some of the other circuits that we go to that are like Barcelona.
And weather forecast as well. I mean, I think what we've probably learned over the last couple of races as well is that the McLaren prefers a cooler track and the Red Bull prefers a warmer track. So if it is hot in Barcelona with the deck that there is there, I think Red Bull will walk it. Well, will walk it. I think they'll be pretty dominant. But again, I think it is sort of on a knife edge, that car, where if the conditions just aren't right, if the track's a bit too bumpy or a bit too curby, then it does sort of throw the balance of the Red Bull out, which we haven't seen in the last 2 seasons. So let's see. I think there's still a lot to play for.
I think you're right. And I mean, what we should do is we should big up Red Bull, and then if they have a hard time, we really can get excited for the rest of the season.
Yeah. That's it. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's not all rosy at Red Bull, I guess, particularly after this weekend with the other car and Sergio Perez's car. So obviously he signed a new 2-year deal at the start of the week, and then had a really disappointing weekend, didn't he? Dropped out in Q1, race-ending crash. He's now, to make matters worse, this has come out since we were off air. So he's got a 3-place grid penalty for driving his car back to the pits. That was to avoid a safety car, which could have compromised Max in the lead. Damon, you're sort of tutting and
well, I'm not tutting because they got him to come back to avoid a safety car. I mean, he could have avoided a safety car by parking it somewhere, but it's very difficult to get rid of your car in Canada. There's not many places you can hide it. But anyway, he has had a mare. He's had a mare, absolute nightmare. Yeah. From being looking like he was just a few tenths, 3 tenths off of Max and being comfortably up there and able to support him, to now suddenly just the last few races has been absolute catastrophes for poor old Checo. But slightly self-inflicted, I feel, in Monaco, but he didn't qualify well. You know, he didn't have a good qualifying. His last 2 qualifyings have been awful. So can it get any worse? Yes, it can. That's the only thing you can say about it. Is when you think it can't get any worse, it does. But let's hope it doesn't. Let's hope he gets up on the front row.
And the funny thing is, the sentiment seems to be that there is an element of that contract being given to Checo to somewhat keep Max sweet, and also to not necessarily put in another driver that's going to maybe take away points from Max. And that we've seen teams who have 2 really quick drivers sometimes battling each other on track, whether that's Carlos and Charles, or whether that's Max and George this weekend, or whether that's Lando and Oscar. You know, that can sometimes end badly and therefore take away points from your drivers and from the team. So there's this element of being part of the reason why they've brought Checo, or they've kept Checo on. But at the same time, I mean, with teams like all the names I just mentioned, with them all performing and all being in the points regularly, there is an element of going, well, is Checo not going to be costing the team so many points if he's not always in it? And I think maybe Canada was a little bit unfortunate as well, and sort of a few things didn't go his way. But I feel like it happens too often from my perspective. It's just, don't really understand.
Yeah, Horner said himself, didn't he? Well, I was going to say, thankfully, Ferrari had a shocker, just to illustrate your point. Because if Ferrari obviously didn't score, but there's, I think, 49-point gap between Red Bull and Ferrari. So if actually Ferrari do have a better weekend and say they get 40 points or 30, even 35 points, then less than a 15-point gap, isn't it?
Mm.
I think it's very interesting our sport's very odd. You have a team, but there are two individual competitors and they're fighting against each other within the team. So it's like having two strikers in a football team and they're both trying to beat each other. They'd be tripping over the ball the whole time. It'd be a nightmare. So what you've got is you've got these teams of engineers on each side of the garage. With Checo, really, they should not worry about Max. He's got it covered. He knows that he's going to deliver. They need to all pile in and help Checo. They need to give him all the support and make sure that they get him up the grid, because that is going to be so valuable to them, the constructors, and also valuable to Max. So maybe JP.
What can they do to do that, Damon? What can they do to do that? Because
I don't know if it's. I don't know if it's
a while now.
Decision making maybe is part of it. Making sure he gets a clear lap, making sure in qualifying, making sure he is on the right tires at the right time, and just everyone rooting for Checo, and making sure that he's able to give the best of what he's got, because he hasn't been able to do that for whatever reason. It's been bad decision making and bad timing, and then. It can't all be bad luck. You can be unlucky a couple of times, but not all the time.
Did the timing surprise both of you? We've obviously heard from some of the guys who were on site this week, but yeah, did the timing surprise you, Naomi, to offer him a 2-year contract? And to your point, Damon, as well, about how drivers used to be offered or silly season used to start at Monza in September. It's peculiar, isn't it, that they've chosen to lock Checo down earlier in the season, even when the form isn't perhaps as good as it should be.
I was surprised. I also was surprised that it was a 2-year deal, although it's sort of come out since that it's more of a 1+1. So
yeah.
So let's see how that develops. But there is this element. I continue my theory around trying to keep Max happy. There's still whispers about there being a potential that Max would go to Mercedes. And I think had they have signed a driver to the team who Max wasn't happy with, let's say Carlos Sainz, for example, then that could have been the decision that pushed him further away from the team. So I think there was an element of stability also for Checo, because that's something that you need as a driver as well, is to avoid that overdriving that we were talking about earlier with George. Is what can you do to make your driver feel more confident? What can you do to make them feel secure? Give them a contract, give them a more than 1 year contract, and they'll probably settle in a little bit better. So there's an element of them doing that to maybe get Checo focused on one thing, and that's just the driving. But I also think there's an element of them trying to keep Max at bay, or not at bay, but to keep Max happy and to make sure he knows what's the future of the team, at least for the foreseeable future.
I've put in we've got a few final things to go, but I put in a little Spain preview, but I kind of think we've covered that because we're talking about how the teams are going to shape up for Spain and how important that's going to be. So what I think we'll do is we'll finish with a shout out to Jamie Chadwick for winning in Indy NXT this weekend. Yeah. Round of applause from Naomi. Yeah, very, 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 very cool. She became the first woman to win on a road course in Indy NXT. That was a mouthful. That follows her podium that she got back in May. Naomi, look, you know Jamie really well, and you've done saw your auditions with her fairly recently for Sky Sports as well. So that's a really cool piece of history, isn't it? That Jamie's achieved there.
Massively. Look, I don't just know Jamie. I also raced against her, and I consider her a friend. And I have to say that for the time that I've known Jamie, she is such a hard worker, and she's putting so much effort into what she's doing all the time. And sometimes, or at least last year, I feel that the results in Indy Next didn't represent the amount of effort she was putting in. So I think it's so great to see. Especially this season, the last couple of races, she's really been picking up the pace, getting more comfortable in that championship. It's a lot to adjust to. And I'm just so happy for her that all her hard work is paying off. And she's making history. So she's, flying that flag for the women in motorsport. And I can't wait to see her have more pole positions and more victories.
I think it's also an endorsement of the concept of the W Series and now the Academy as well. It's because, if it's going to be more difficult because, there's more opportunity for guys or whatever the issue is, if you've given just a female-only series a chance, then you know who the winner is of that series. And that was Jamie. Jamie just showed she was a class cut above, and she's able to then take the stepping stone into competing. And I think confidence is such a huge thing in sport. You need to know what it's like to be at the front. And if you never get to the front because it's just, conditions that you just don't get enough of a chance and you don't get any experience, you're never going to get to the front if you mix it with the guys as well. So I think she's grown from having had those championship opportunities. I'd be very pleased to hear what Naomi thinks about that, because that's just a bloke talking.
No, I totally agree. And look, I think I obviously was a part of W Series too, and to some extent it also really helped my career. But I think the most important thing for the championships, and I'll probably talk more about F1 Academy now because they're more relevant today, is the opportunity that they creating for these young girls, giving them track time, giving them visibility, giving them ultimately the platform to show what female talent can do, and therefore partners are now more likely to back these young girls. And Jamie probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to race in Indy next had it not have been for the platform she was given, because racing is not free and someone's got to pay for it, and someone is paying for it now because they know who Jamie Chadwick is. So 100% it's making the difference. But it's so important also for these young girls to come out of these championships, compete against the boys, and then prove that they can be the best, which Jamie is now doing. So fantastic to see that happening.
Naomi, if it's not a silly question, what do you think that will do for Jamie's career going forward? Where do you see her over the next couple of years? What do you think sort of opportunities will arise for Jamie?
Well, I mean, it's going to put her on the map, isn't it? Not that she wasn't already, but a victory like that's also writing history. 100% will have alarm bells going off in loads of different places that will, skyrocket opportunities. And whether that's for her to come back across the pond and race in F3 or F2 and eventually maybe end up on the F1 grid, ? Or maybe she stays in the US and races in the Step Up Championship there to race in India. I mean, that would be great. I mean, that would be an incredible opportunity for her as well. And it might be slightly more realistic now, but I think anything is possible. And she's just got to keep performing the way she is now. There's still a few races left on the calendar this season. So hopefully she continues to impress the way she has been.
Netflix. Special episode on Jamie Chadwick. Maybe I can see it. I mean, they're definitely going to be huge interest, I think.
F1 Academy have already announced that they're going to have a Netflix series of their own. So that in itself will also put a lot of eyeballs on the female aspect of the sport, much like Netflix has done a huge justice to Formula One in itself.
Yeah. Damon, you know what comes out today? The Tour de France one.
Oh, right. And the next
Yeah.
episode.
That.
Yeah. Which is very exciting.
Can I just say I am doing the Tour de France? I'm not doing the whole thing. I'm not doing the whole thing.
I was going to say, what?
I'm going to start a Just Giving page because I'm going to be cycling to raise money for Neuro UK. In the L'Etape, which is it's one of the legs of the Tour de France, 16,000 cyclists. So anyway, I'm training for that at the moment, but I will give you the links and all that nonsense, or probably on my Instagram and Twitter and so forth. But it's for Neuro UK, which is neurological diseases, to try and I'm an ambassador for them. So trying to do a bit of a charity fundraiser. But yes, good. Cycling. Do you cycle a lot, Matt? Are you? Naomi,
I love cycling. Yeah, Naomi.
I'm more of a spinner, to be honest. I do actually have a watt bike in my flat, and I love a spin class. But outdoor, I don't know, it just seems like it takes too long. But sorry, Damon, good on you. That's great. I know you are always on it with your philanthropy, and we love that about you.
We'll try and raise a few quid.
How far is it, Damon?
Try 9 hours. Yeah,
ouch.
But,
oh goodness!
But I'm taking my bike to Spain. I've got to do a few. I've got to keep training, so I can't stop. So
Can't
It's going to be
won't
hot
stop.
out. Hopefully it's hot out there because it'll be more like South France. But anyway, we digress onto cycles.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see the Netflix cycling thing, Matt. Well done.
Yes. Back to that. Yeah. But also, huge congratulations to Jamie Chadwick as well for a brilliant record-breaking weekend. Right, look, we just got time to tell you about the timings for next weekend. So look, no Formula One action this weekend. Before we head to the Spanish Grand Prix for the 21st of June, you can catch all the action on Sky Sports F1 then. It's then on to Austria and then Silverstone, the first triple header of the 2024 season. So they're going to come thick and fast in the European season. But Damon, you're off to Spain in a couple of weeks' time?
I am, doing the Spanish Grand Prix.
Naomi, what's your next...
Yes, so I'm actually doing all of Europe other than Monza. So it's going to be a busy couple of weeks for me. But yes, I will be in Barcelona. But I'll be working more so on the F1 Academy side. So you won't see me on Sky Sports, unless you may see me on Sky Sports for the F1 Academy.
Just in the background. Normally,
no, for the F1 Academy. For the F1 Academy.
Okay, fine.
Well, come and say hello anyway.
Yes,
I'll show you my bike.
I'd love to see it. I will give you a bit of a pep talk, and then I will push you on your way because I won't be joining you.
You don't have to touch me. It's all right.
Okay, I won't.
It's going to be a busy few weeks, certainly. Thank you, Damon. Thank you, Naomi. Appreciate your time. We're going to be back next Tuesday. Hope you can join us then. Bye for now.